The prelude to International Art Post came when I was learning the process of full color printing, working at Intermedia Press in Vancouver. And the two owners, one of them was Ed Varney, who was already making artist stamps and had produced one or two editions in which he invited people in the network to participate in. As the owner of Intermedia Press, he didn't have to charge people for that. It was like his edition and his gift to the network. But I figured out that if I charged a certain amount per stamp per 500 copies, that I would be able to cover the expenses, and also eventually I realized I have to pay for my own time and labor. You know, I mean, this gift economy is really wonderful, but at a certain point you sort of get worn down by it. So I worked out a formula and I started out very inexpensive. I think I charged $35 or something for 500 stamps. Well, the first edition, Tom Gore refused his stamps, and he had done, I don't know, 15 stamps or something. He refused to pay, and he wanted the stamps as well. So at that point I realized I had to cover more than, you know, more than just what it would cost me to actually produce the things. So then I went to the network and put out with the Banana Rag the call if people wanted to have their own image done. I started out with asking them for an image about that size, which was proportional to what I was going to be doing, because at that point what people were sending me were photographs or little artworks, not digital files. that sort of process came along, I don't know exactly when, and I was assembling those things in the computer. Except, no, I wasn't in the beginning, because the pieces were that size. I wasn't manipulating them. So my layouts were huge, and I pasted them all up, and I had to paste up the title, you know, like the International Art Post, on layers of acetate. I mean, when I think about what I was doing and how easy it is by comparison, like I would walk into the print shop with like 4 layers of acetate with the photographs, the text, you know, and the color separation. It was amazing that I kept it up, but I don't remember at what point I got computerized. It was after I had left Intermedia, but they were doing a group purchase of computers for the press, and one of my friends who was working for the press let me know. And so I appealed to Ed and said, can I be included in this group purchase? So I was able to get my first Mac. I mean, they didn't pay for it, but it didn't cost me the arm and leg it would if I went to the, you know, computer store. So from that point on, then became a matter of assembling, doing the layout in the computer and importing the things. So then I reduced the size of the image people had to send me, and I also asked for them as digital files. And so that was the evolution, and I really have not got a good memory for what year that transition, but I do have the acetate with the overlays from the original issues. As somebody told me, well, you know, for archival purposes I should have all that stuff, and I'm going, I wonder. I must tell you, the first issue that the Intermedia Press printed of mine, I get a phone call from the pressman who's telling me, this paper is not very good, the image is kind of spreading, and maybe we better go to the high gloss paper. I said, well, whatever, you better do that. And it wasn't until I used the paper that they had run through the press that was spreading. I was using it as make-ready, and very often when I'm handling paper, I would lick my thumbs and so on, and this paper is gummed. They printed it on the wrong side. They printed it on the gummed side. So that was an interesting thing. Then the first issue, and I think maybe the second issue, I hand perforated on Ed Varney's line perforator, which is a device that's like an old sewing machine with a treadle on it, and you simply put the sheet, 3 or 4 sheets at the most, because his pins were dull, because they were very old. So you put it in line, you stomp on the treadle, and the row of pins comes down and up, and that hole is punched in one row on, say, 4 sheets of paper. So imagine an edition of 1,000, which is what I did in my first couple of editions. To do there's 36 stamps on a sheet, so there's like 6 rows of 3 or something. I can't remember exactly what the layout is, but a lot of time perforating those stamps. And then, of course, once their sheets are perforated, the individual orders have to be separated by hand, fold and tear, package, package, package. It was an enormous labor of love, which is why it kind of burned out very quickly, because it was just too much. I mean, I still do the hand separation, but after the first or second edition, Ed reported that this rotary perforator was available through Vancouver Bookbinders, and we went in on it together and bought it. Well, then he had it at his house under the deck, and he wasn't doing anything with it. And I said, well, because I was going over to his place to do this stomping business. And he said, well, I really don't want it. And I said, well, I do. So I bought him out and had it. And fortunately, where I was living, there was a garage that I could keep it in, because I was upstairs. You'd never get the thing upstairs. It was huge. So then a friend of mine helped me basically refurbish it. We repinned it. Each wheel, each perforation wheel has 500 pins that go into a die wheel that's below. And so as they rotate together, that's where the little holes are popped out. Anyway, my friend Douglas was active in going over the machine. He was really great. He really, I couldn't have done it myself. And he took it apart, took the wheels off the rod, and took them out, and we together put these 500 pins back in the wheels, and then he put it together again, and it worked. So then it was, okay, now how to learn. And of course I had a lot to learn about paper handling, because I wasn't doing one sheet at a time now. So I jog the paper both ways and then take maybe 4 sheets and spread them and push them into the machine, and there was lots that went astray one way or the other. So I had to print more than the 500 that I needed to supply the orders. But anyway, that was the process. And then once they were perforated 4 times through the machine, because you only had 5 wheels, and I needed more for each direction. So a lot of this feeding the machine. And I did get a few people learned how to do it, so I could job it out. Not too many. And so that was, and then from that point then comes the hand separating and packaging and little plastic things on cardstock, like it looks like a really produced item when the people will get their orders. And then addressing and mailing. It wasn't exactly a big money maker, but it did cover its expenses. And people loved it. People loved having their own stamps that they could lick and stick on their mail. Well, there are quite a few stamp artists who have their own line perforators, and I know Steve Smith is one of them, who did a very great Passing the Flame sheet of stamps, and he often bases his stamp imagery on US postage, and he just does these little twists to it. He's brilliant. So there may be stamps from my editions, but there's probably many that people have done using either their printer from their computer, and then they have a line perforator that they stomp out. And they might do an edition of 25 or 50 sheets or something. They're not doing 500. Robbie Rudin, also known as Dogfish, he's in Seattle, and he has an artist stamp museum that is unbelievable. Everybody that has a perforator is a stamp artist. Buzz Blur is another guy. He's the one who does these portraits from photographs. And I don't quite understand this process, but he takes Polaroids and then he uses the back and carves, and so they're outstanding portraits and very black and white. Jim Felter is another one who's written a book. Well, I helped him write the book, but anyway, he has a very extensive museum of artist stamps himself, and has done a lot himself. So, so there's quite a few people that are specialized in artist stamps as part of their way of doing mail art. So I just want to, let you know that it's not just me that's doing the stamps. It's really, and even people who don't have perforators, like Ed Higgins is an old stamp artist stamp maker. He did paintings and then he'd reduce them down. But he doesn't have a perforator, so he's always bugging the other people if they will please perforate 25 sheets for him. The celebration of mail art and the passing the flame is an important addenda to that statement because for one thing, I think mail art has, within the circle of mail artists, it's well known and well established, but outside of this particular network, it's still not, hasn't really reached, you know, general public awareness that this is a phenomena that's going on. So the celebration is because it's been an amazing influence in my life, and that the passing the flame is my hope that by showing the works that people are doing here in this show, that I will get a few people at least fired up, as I have been fired up about mail art, and that they might take on some of the new people that are involved. Because, you know, there's a website in Holland called the International Union of Mail Artists, and a lot of mail art information has gravitated to that site. And so then the show was advertised on there, or was posted on there, so that what it does is extend the network beyond mailed art. And I think many of the people that participate in that network do mail things, but there's also a lot that's online that I just don't have time for. And again, my Luddite side is just saying, I want the real thing, and if you're not going to send it, well, too bad. It's like, I send the real thing, I don't send out, you know, look at my website or see me on Facebook or whatever. So then that's the idea, was that I can hopefully get a few people that will be super turned on and get the pleasure that I've had out of having these international connections, because it really has been an amazing opening up for me, of especially in Europe. You know, there's a lot of people in the States, but the opportunity to it seems like the European mail artists are better connected within the art structure and are able to arrange or have affiliations with galleries and so on, which many of the North American people don't have because the galleries just haven't been interested. So it's been very interesting and connective, and I'd like to see people get a charge out of that more so than they do out of Facebook or, you know, LinkedIn or texting. I'm going to try not to be too critical of that in the workshops, because I'm sure, well, especially with the youth group, I mean, I'm sure they're all going to have their cell phones with them, and the first thing I'm going to say is, please turn your cell phones off. So we're here and we're now, and this is what I'm interested in. The workshops are coming out of the call for work for the celebration of mail art. In other words, the invitation went out long ago. Many people have sent in their responses to this call. I don't know what the responses are like. I've seen some of the envelopes, but the opening of these envelopes is going to be the pleasure of those who participate in the workshops. And within the workshop setting, I'm hoping to inspire them to create responses and take the responsibility of mailing their response, because this is something that a lot of people have never done. It's gone to the post office, especially young people, mailed a letter, my goodness. So I'm hoping that, you know, this antiquated way of communication will have some appeal, and it might not all be young people. I don't know what kind of, and I brought certain projects with me that I didn't get around to finishing myself, and I had put a call out to my network, for example, for the little printer test strips that are on the, like when you open up a cereal box to recycle it, and I asked the network if they would contribute these things, and the deluge has not stopped. It's amazing, and I've trimmed them all. I don't think the ones I'm giving, but I brought a bunch of those, so I'm thinking, well, if people don't know what to do, which is often the case when people are not confronted with actually being asked to do a visual artwork, I can give them the idea for this project, which was that there would be a postcard. They could do some frottage or something. I've got a bunch of materials to do that, and that could be the background, and then they could maybe just spell out the person's name in these little test strips. That's sort of the, you know, an easy, big easy, which may get them started if they're blocked. If they're not blocked, fine. They'll, you know, there'll be other materials, and there will be rubber stamps. 3 of them, cancellations, one from the Art Gallery of Greater Victoria, one from Open Space, and my own one that was 45 years of fooling around with a banana. So there's rubber stamps, and I'm not sure what all supplies I brought, but I hope that they will, and I've got some of the International Art Post stamps that they can use on their mail if they choose, or they can draw their own. I've got what I call stamp blanks that are perforated gummed paper that they can actually draw their own stamps on and use on their things. So I'm hoping that, you know, my enthusiasm for this network will be catchy, and that some of these people will go, yes, let's get involved. We'll see. I'm hopeful. One of the ways that the network has built is that people who become involved get the idea, well, they may have an affiliation with an artist-run center or a gallery or whatever, and so there are then calls for projects, and there are many of those calls, and some of them, originally the rules were you would send to, the call would say there's no fees, there's no jury, and what else, there's something else, there's no rules, you can send what you will, and that a catalog was promised to all. Well, then a lot of that has gravitated to the internet, so a lot of the calls come out on the internet, for example with the IUOMA site, and also a lot of the catalogs are put up on websites. And some people, that's fine. It doesn't, I'm a paper addict and an image junkie, and I want it on paper. And I have a wonderful collection of, you know, catalogs from shows that I participated in all over Europe and USA, and a few in Japan. There was one in Australia at one point. You know, so it hasn't, you know, and South America. There's been a few in Argentina and Brazil. So it's pretty international, which I think, I'm hoping that the appeal of that kind of exotic connection will be something that gets people interested too.